Excel 2016, Module 5, Part 8. We're going to begin looking at pivot tables. Pivot tables are a little confusing to explain what they are. It's kind of easier if you build one and see what you can do with it. So hopefully in working through these examples, they will begin to make more sense to you. This is a very useful tool in business. It allows you to look at and format the data in different ways. So we're going to go back into our June workbook. You want to be on the original sales data worksheet that has the June table already on it. You want to make sure that you have a table. You should see the table design. If you did the rest of the tutorial or the module, you will also see a slicer that is associated with that table. But at the very least, you must have a Table Tools Design contextual tab that's associated with this June table, and your name of your table should be June table. If you haven't done that, please go to the Insert and insert a table, and then change the name of the table to June table. Once we have that, we're going to use this table as a starting point, and we are going to insert a pivot table from that. So you're going to go to the Insert tab, and you're going to choose the Pivot Table button. Notice the screen that pops up. It asks you, what is your source of data for the pivot table? It's best to use a table, because if you add additional data later on to the table, it automatically expands that size of the table to include it. If you don't choose a table, if you choose a range like I have here, then if I add more data, I have to go in and change the range to include that data. So it's always best to insert using a table. We're going to put our pivot table in a new worksheet and click OK. It begins by setting up a new worksheet for us. This area here is where it's going to be creating the new pivot table. As long as this area is active, you should see a list of options over here so you can choose your fields. If you were to click somewhere else, the pivot table is no longer active and that pane goes away. Also, when your pivot table is active, you will see two additional contextual tabs: an Analyze and a Design. One way that this pane will not show up, even if the pivot table is active, is if this button here that says Field List is unchecked. If that is unchecked, then you're not going to see that. So if you do not see your pane over here, check this button once you've made sure you've selected on the pivot table. The field pane allows us to select the fields we want to use, as well as determine where to put them in our pivot table. So we're going to start out by entering some fields. We're going to add sales ID. Notice right now it tried to create a sum for that. That's not really what I had in mind. So I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm going to show you another way to add it. If I want the sales ID to show up in the rows, instead of checking the box, I can click on the words and drag them down to the rows, and then it will place that in that field. So those are the two ways that you can add a field. You can check the box, or you can drag it down there. You can add multiple copies of the same field by dragging it a second time into that box. Okay, so the next field we're going to add is the amount. It automatically defaults to the sum. If I wanted to change that, I could change it. But before we do that, let's take a look at adding some additional fields. I can also add the sales date. And then I'm also going to add the business. And you can see what it's doing is each time you add something, it adds it as a subset of the item before it. So it starts out with sales IDs, sales ID 1. Then it puts all of the dates within that sales ID, and then all of the business segments within each date. And it instantly is creating subtotals for each of those. All of these items can be changed. So for example, if I wanted to see columns for the business type, I can click on business type, drag it up into the column box, and now within each segment I see the dates and the actual business segments, as well as a grand total, are displayed in the columns. If I wanted to see an average, I could easily change that by clicking on this drop-down arrow and choose Value Field Settings. So notice here on this particular option, I can change the title. So instead of it saying in the corner here, sum of amount, I could have it say total sales. I can change the function that is being performed. And the last thing that I need to do here is affect the number formatting. With pivot tables, you cannot do the number formatting on the Home tab. The Home tab attaches that number formatting to a specific cell. But as you saw a minute ago, as I move fields from the box of row to column or in other ways, then it moves those numbers around. If the formatting is assigned to a cell and the number moves to a different cell, I'm going to lose the number formatting. So we have to do our number formatting here on the value field settings so that it stays with the number and does not move if I move the numbers. Okay, it has to stay with them. So notice if I drag this back down, the number formatting still stays there no matter where I move those numbers to. The other thing that we can do is we can look at some design. So if I want to look at my styles, I can choose any appropriate style. And notice you've got the light ones, the medium ones, and the dark ones. And sometimes when you have multiple levels of totals, it's helpful to either pick a medium or a dark so that you can see the subtotals differentiated. So if we pick style medium 14, you'll notice that when it does the subtotals for the sales ID number, it color codes them to differentiate them from the daily totals. In the next video, we're going to take a look at making some changes to this pivot table to show how we can filter it through the use of the filter box, the slicers, and also how we can refresh the data in it. But before we do that, I'm going to call this worksheet Pivot 1. I'm going to save my work, and if you want to further review pivot tables, I will see you back for the next segment.